Jeff Howell here, and welcome to the next episode of the Backstory on Marketing and AI. And if you haven't already done so, please visit ProRelevant.com and sign up for all of these episodes and podcasts. I am the author of the upcoming book, The AI Marketing Machine, and you can find out more information on that at marketingmachine.prorelevant.com. Today, I'm interviewing Perry Shiroa of Duma, and let me tell you a little bit about her. Perry is a marketing automation expert with over 20 years of experience turning chaotic email strategies into highly converting customer journeys. A former print journalist turned C-suite executive, Perry launched her first email campaign in 2002 and never looked back. She has since led marketing strategy for both Fortune 500 companies and scaling startups with deep specialization in email, SMS, CRM alignment, and marketing technology. Perry, welcome and so good to have you.
Thank you, Guy. It's great to be on your show. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So good to have you. And so tell us, what is your backstory on AI and marketing?
Well, I remember back in 2002, I was working for a mergers and acquisitions company with a couple hundred people in the call center. They were trying to reach out to business owners. First of all, I said to the room full of executives, I really think this email thing's going to catch on. And then after that landed, I said, and also, what if we could use that email as part of the multi-touch strategy for marketing in general and bring it to sales so that it creates an icebreaker for sales? And that was really the beginning and there was nothing at the time that did that, right? So we kind of Frankenstein sage sales logics. I worked with the IT team to be able to iframe in the stats from the marketing platform that we were using at the time. And we did that very successfully and had wonderful results up until I became a beta user for HubSpot. And then I was like, whoa, this is exactly what I was thinking of. And so then we started using HubSpot. And that's kind of how that was where the path began.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that is definitely early on, but definitely what a game changer back then, to be able to use email. And now, of course, the game changer is AI. So
Yeah.
fantastic. Well, that's really a great background, Perry. So tell us, what is Duma?
Duma is an email marketing automation agency. I built a division in a larger agency in San Diego. Once I built up email marketing, there was a definite trend to branch out and take certain departments out of agencies and get more boutique style agencies as opposed to the do-it-all agency. So at that time, the owners and I agreed that I would branch out and start this agency, Duma, and just solely focus on email marketing automation, which was fantastic. It was great because the pitches were very honed in. While I have spent a good part of my career managing multi-channel operations, just being able to really zero in and build a team around email and around SMS, and now even pulling in WhatsApp and some of the other basic messaging platforms that are not in any way like social media, a very different kind of communication. And so I was able to really build that out, and I started with a nice client base and still have many of those clients. I tend to retain clients because of the specialization of our work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's if you can retain clients from, 20 years ago, that's definitely kudos to you because that's definitely something very difficult. Not only are they being successful because of your work, but also you've been able to provide them stellar capabilities and stellar service. So fantastic. You've been doing email marketing for a long time, and it sounds like you've been able to keep your clients for a long time, which is definitely kudos to you that they've been successful because of your work, but also you must have been providing them some great service to keep them as clients. So what do you see has changed the most over the last 20 years or so?
Well, email went from a very outbound, intrusive kind of platform and channel to a more, well, some people would say inbound, but I consider it pretty much a 360 channel, whether it has to do with attracting the audience at the top of the funnel or retaining them all the way down to re-engaging with you. I mean, one of the reasons I feel like our company is successful with retention is because we are hyper focused on retention in everything that we do. So we help them retain clients, we retain clients, and so on.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's retention is a critical issue because it's easier to retain a client than it is to win a new one. So, how does Duma work with brands and fixing the gaps in their customer journeys, and maybe how email and SMS, and you mentioned WhatsApp as well. How do you bring all of those to connect to sales?
Well, we try and identify the proper platform, and the platform is key. Whether it's a HubSpot or a Salesforce related product or a Klaviyo for e-commerce, we try and identify the best platform, and then we start with a very fundamental, basic array of automations. And then we also use automations to ensure that we are moving people through the database and through different stages properly as the consumers or the clients or prospects actually behave out in the wild, right? And we're capturing all of that data and utilizing automation to ensure that they are getting segmented properly and we're getting the right amount of hyper personalization to keep things relevant.
Yeah, and I think it's that personalization element that makes such a difference. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's so funny. I remember doing a presentation several years ago about personalization being way more than a first name, right? And so that has only grown over time. And what I love to see are how the automation platforms have evolved. And I can remember at one point where there would be data in the platform, but you couldn't access it. I don't know if you remember that those days, but you couldn't utilize it to trigger additional communications or to change statuses. And so that the gloves kind of came off on that one. And now we have access to all of the data that we're collecting. And I find that the ability to use dynamic content blocks and layer in specified messages to folks at each stage of the journey so that it's very, very personalized, not just by first name, but by, hey, I noticed that you are having a particular issue with XYZ. Here is a solution that we're putting right at the top of this email that we're sending to you. I think that just makes all the difference in the world. And I feel like I got into journalism to help people, and I have carried that desire over into marketing. And I try to make sure everything that we touch, everything we send out is helpful, and utilizing automation to do that and personalization all the way through the content to do that. I mean, it's the gold star of marketing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I've played with some of the personalization, and it is amazing what you can do, and especially when you combine it with some of the capabilities that AI has to
Ooh.
understand what is really personal for that individual and company, and
Mhm.
then be able to embed that either into an email or an SMS can really make a difference. I've seen our open rates go from under 10% to over 20 or 30%. So it's pretty fascinating. So how do you see AI fitting into the equation?
AI is going to continue to allow us to process those large quantities of data and help us produce content that we can then refine. We use it all the time for producing content, as so many people do. And so it helps, across the whole team, as opposed to where we maybe had somebody who was a little more data oriented, and being a boutique firm, we don't have a massive staff, right? But so maybe we had somebody who was a little more data oriented, and thank goodness for them. And now they also can elevate content and work on content. Now we have different layers with editors and whatnot to make sure that everything is, where we want it to be and up to best practice. But it allows more of my team anyway to be effective across multiple disciplines, as opposed to, just the word person not really being very good with data. They can process some of the data to understand the KPIs that are going to drive their next blog post or their next email or their next SMS content. And so that's really making a huge difference in expanding our capability. I feel like we are at the really the tip of the iceberg of all of this. And as we continue, who knows where we'll go? I mean, you see these sci-fi movies where we get so elevated, we turn into a little burst of light, right? It's like, I mean, AI is just going to allow us to continue to elevate all of our performance individually and at scale.
Yeah, and how do you fit though AI, especially with when you're trying to personalize email or SMS or any of these, highly direct marketing channels? How do you integrate that AI with legal oversight and compliance oversight, and even making sure that it's correct versus or not correct? Because AI unfortunately has a reputation of sometimes going off the rails.
Yeah, I call it sometimes AI slop, and some people call it where AI hallucinates and whatnot. But, it's a tool like everything else, and you have to remember your audience. You have to read everything that it produces and don't use things that you haven't read, right? And you have to remember who you're supposed to be talking to when it produces this content for you. You can't, it's not going to be personalized if you're not thinking about the person that you're delivering it to. As long as you stick with that, AI can help elevate your efforts and allow you to accomplish more in less time. But if you just start spinning out, like I saw the other day a social media ad, and it had uh, this air freshener tastes like this. And it was like, I don't think anybody read that. Because if that air freshener has a taste and that's what's selling it, then somebody's not paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah, well, if you're eating that air freshener, I guess it does have a taste.
I don't think that's on the bottle. I don't think you're
Yeah.
supposed
Yeah, do not allow your children to eat this.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, what's interesting though is so you have a human in the middle. So everything and every personalized message that you're sending out is being read. Is that kind of how you see the future?
I mean, I don't see how we can avoid that. I do see that. I hate to predict because who knows what, I mean, who would have thought 30 years ago we'd be having this conversation, right? But I do see I see human oversight for AI as mandatory forever, as far as I can tell. As far as creating content that's relevant to the people you're sending it to. I feel like just like, sometimes they talk about lawyers will be obsolete. Well, I mean, in a way, yeah, AI can create all of this, sure, an entire estate plan. Somebody's got to review it, make sure it does what you think it's going to do, which you need to be legally trained to do that, right? And somebody needs to know the process to file it so that it's properly filed in the right locations and whatnot. And so I feel like that our involvement maybe will be less at this lower level. So I do worry about entry level folks a little bit more, but I feel like there's always going to have to be a human layer buffering AI.
Yeah, yeah, and especially I kind of agree with you, and I think that has a couple of other benefits as well, which potentially allows you to maintain ownership and copyrights and things like that, depending upon what the creative is. But that if you have something that's moderately personalized versus highly personalized, and you're sending them out to a huge list, that is it's also tough for a human to even read those.
Right.
Because after you've read 10 or 20 of them, you're barely able to keep your eyes open, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's true. And it's also true on the other end. I mean, that's another reason I think humans have to stay involved because when is it all going to start to sound the same to the end user or to the recipient? You know, when is Chat GPT's blog post on XYZ not going to have any personality? I guess hopefully they'll just keep evolving it. But you just, as far as reading it on in-house, you just have to space that out. You have to plan your content calendar far enough in advance that you have that QA time and be able to, really be strategic about the dynamic content you're using. I mean, I don't know when a time will come that if I send to 10,000 people, there'll be 10,000 versions. I think they'll always end up being somewhere in the neighborhood of, you know, 10 versions. Maybe
Mhm.
someday magically we'll get to 20 versions of this content that we're sending out. But at some point, I would imagine there'd be a point of diminishing return on that deep of personalization because we are human. I mean, we all kind of fall into certain behaviors and segments and likes and dislikes as time goes on.
Yeah, and I think too, to your point, I think 80% of the people that are receiving the message that are maybe in a segment or in an audience of some commonality with some commonalities, they're probably going to get a message that is more or less the same. And then maybe you have, another 15% that are going to get maybe much more personalized. And then you're going to have 5% where it's just not worth to read through. And so you give them one standard message of some kind. And so
Right.
then that does reduce the level of review, the human review that's necessary so that
Mhm.
you can actually do the full review and certainly you might sacrifice off, maybe a couple of percent of the audience, but at a much reduced cost of the actual human in the loop review.
Right. Absolutely. I think you're right on there. And I think the thing to be careful about is just like marketing automation has always had the potential to go awry. We've all gotten those messages that are like, dear whoever we're sending this to, you know, somebody was supposed to take that out.
Guilty
But
as charged. I've made them myself. It
like,
happens. It happens.
and AI is just introducing the ability to do that at an even larger scale.
Yeah, that's true. How true. Let's automate those errors so they're really
Yeah,
good.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, how funny. So, what do you think is the biggest mind shift? Now, you've been in the industry for quite a while now, but what do you think is the biggest mind shift that marketers have to make going back, let's say the last 15 or 20 years to where we are today?
Mhm. I think I think in speaking specifically about email marketing, I think the mind shift of understanding how to have multiple touch points that aren't identical that are also all the way through relevant, so the typical resend to non-opens, that kind of thing, where you just change the subject line. I mean, that's definitely useful in certain cases, but for the most part what we're thinking now is more of a conversation, and how is this conversation flowing across all of these touch points, even omni-channel touch points. We want to, in a way, it's back where we started. My dad was in advertising in the 70s, and the campaign that came up, whether it was quarterly or the annual campaign, that story was what everything was pinned on. And so creating a conversation that is cohesive across all of these different channels and across an entire flow with multiple touch points, I think is something that it is where marketers have had to evolve to or re-evolve to. And marketing automation has helped that versus the single send blast that
Mm.
are very, I don't know, almost they're extra two-dimensional, as opposed to these interactive flows.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think you're right. The transition from kind of a one-way message Which, when you think about TV, when there were three channels and you were one of the admin, you would put out this message and it was a one-way thing, and you'd hope that people would come into the store to buy your stuff. Well, early on, email was certainly that way as well, where you'd send out, this huge blast and everybody'd get the same message, and then, you'd have some bounces and you'd have some other things, and you'd get some click-throughs, which everybody was happy about, and then you were trying to do everything you could to increase those click-throughs. But certainly having a conversation that can I don't know if it automatically, but certainly be able to respond to what comes back and then respond to that, and then and really have like you said, a conversation with your prospect and customer.
Absolutely, because what they engage with, then you start to layer on additional, you exit them from one automation into another automation that is geared toward what they engaged with. And, similar to the algorithms that are happening across Google or across Meta, and it is crazy to think about in my dad's world, where he would put this out in a magazine and just hope that there were some results. Well, when I started an email, I felt the same way because, it would be conversations with the sales director, and it's like, geez, I don't know what happened, but we got all these inbound calls and we closed all these deals today. And I'm like, I sent an email that day. I think it's related, and there was just no attribution. And that's the other thing AI is just totally dialing in already, is just the ability to really work with the attribution and increase the connectivity between the cause and effect of our actions.
Yeah, yeah, and that whole measurement technology is a huge, huge step as well, for marketers to really improve and constantly iterate what they're doing so they can get better results. Well, listen, I'd love to keep going, but we've got we're kind of down to the end. One last question, and that is, what advice would you give to an up and coming new marketer?
I would give the advice of starting at the beginning, learning how to pitch the tools that you need to succeed. I think that's one of the biggest struggles that young marketers have, is that they know because they're in tune with all of these different maybe their podcasts, maybe their, email newsletters that they're receiving. They're in tune with the latest and greatest technology. But just like when I was starting out and thought email was going to be actually something that stuck, these young marketers need to understand enough about attribution and their ROI to say, if we do this, we're going to most likely see this kind of return on the investment for this. And let's stop, trying to piece it together here without the right tools, and let's go for the right tools.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and because I think it's unfortunate these kids coming out of college and with a marketing degree and really ready to take on the world, and now they're not only competing against their peers, but they're competing against AI, and being
Mm,
able to show real value early on to a senior marketer who can kind of almost sit there and say, "Well, let me just do it myself."
mhm.
It's a tough battle for them, I think.
You're right. I think you're exactly right. And learning how to showcase that value and the value you're bringing to the table, the value your knowledge is going to bring, the value the technology is going to bring, just learning how to showcase that and not being shy about doing it, I think is essential.
Yeah, agreed. So, well, thank you so
Yeah.
much, Perry. That was fantastic. I really appreciate it. So, where can folks learn more about you and your company?
Sure. If they go to perrysherraw.com, there is information about how to contact me. There's also information for a free consultation. I'm always happy to take a look at brands and identify ways that we could help optimize their marketing automation and communications. And so it's all right there, perrysherraw.com.
Oh, fantastic. So perryshaw.com. So,
Mhm.
well, thank you again for participating. And for the audience, please stay tuned for many other videos in this series of the backstory on marketing and AI. And if you get a chance, please take a look at marketingmachine.prorelevant.com and learn more about my upcoming book. Perry, thank you so much. It was fantastic to have you online today.
Thank you, guys.